morning. Works? Okay. Good morning. Well, I'm also happy to be here to discuss magazines with all of you that are interested in magazines. I came last night from Amsterdam, and this is a picture I took at the airport. This is how most people discover magazines. This is how most people find and buy magazines. And I think this picture tells a lot about the business of running magazines. First, you see that the magazines are nicely categorized. In this shop, it presented hundreds of titles, but only 7 categories of magazines. I think it tells you a story of what happens. The reason behind it is because the magazines need to be targeted to a specific target audience. And it's very difficult to conceive more categories or to find something that you may be interested, but you don't know what you're looking for. For example, my background is design, but I don't read design magazines because I find that I know enough about design, so I want to find something else. But it's very hard to find something out of my demographics. What should I read? Should I read women's magazines because I want to find something new? The reason why this strict categorization happens is because all these magazines in this particular kiosk are funded by advertising. So I'll talk a little bit about this. Most of the magazines today contain the ads, but it's not the physical presence of the advertising that that matters. It's really what it actually means for publishers. This model of advertising-funded publishing started in the 1830s, where a young fellow, Benjamin Day, started New York Sun. And at the time when most of daily papers cost 10 cents, he was able to reduce the price by tenfold, offer it for 1 cent, but increase the print run and filled the gap with advertising. Before that time, before 1830s, the relationship between readers and publishers was very direct. There was one-to-one, really strict relationship. Right now, the advertisers came in the middle and basically funded most of the magazines. I think this has more consequences than you can imagine. If you fund a magazine with advertising, again, it's not just taking space for the content, but it affects what kind of content you put there, because the relationship, what makes a successful magazine or not is how you integrate advertising in the magazines. It has influences on what to choose, but there are alternatives. I wanted to mention this project, which started at the same time when Works at Work started. It's a Dutch journalism platform called the Correspondent. In 2013, it started the Big Bang. In less than 30 days, it raised €1.5 million, and by now it has over 50,000 paying subscribers, and offer high-quality journalism without any advertising, where it's produced for the members only on a daily basis. Quite unbelievable in a day when we believe that ads or integrated ads or native ads are the only way to move forward. The Correspondent has been growing from year to year. They published this essay, which is I would encourage you to read it because it talks about the impact of relying only on the ads. And advertising is a good thing, but it's important to consider the consequences of it. And in short, they're saying if your main focus is to sell ads, you end up with stories like this, which is not great. These stories are written only to support the advertising next to it, and it has nothing to do with journalism. So focus on selling ads kills journalism, but also the troubling fact is that the publisher's losing the connection with the readers, which traditionally has been quite strict connection, and for last decades or so, or even a century, there's been a growing gap, and there's been more parties in between. Right now, for example, it's a Facebook that sits in between the readerships and publishers. And also, depending how publishers play with the ads, they possibly can change the relationship in what readers expect and what not. But I do think it's an interesting time. It's what Boris has said. I think it's a time of changes. And the New York Times, which has been published for over 150 years, only recently, for the first time in the history, they get more revenues from subscriptions than from the advertising. They rethink in the relationship between the readers and the publisher, and realize that it's probably more important to build the readership around the brand rather than building just the advertisers around the brand. And I think this needs to be coexistence. I'll be speaking mainly about this magazine today, Works at Work, which started in 2013. And these are 8 issues we produced by now. It's coming out twice a year in small format, about 100 pages, magazine about creativity in unexpected situations. It does contain ads. We limit it to less than 5% of the ads. And the ads are usually, they come from our readers. This is the format that we use. I think most of magazines which start, they start with the idea to make a change. I don't think any publisher today starts with doing what has been done before. At the same time, we inherit a lot of what has happened. The models for publishing today are quite fixed. So I think one of the role of a publisher today is not only care about unique content and unique packaging, but to find out a different way how to make it happen, how to look at the financing, how to reach out to the readers, and in what form to bring it. One of the first questions that our readers asked me was, why do you print it? And that's why we started with the crowdfunding, as it is common, not only to raise the revenue, but to answer this question: how do people want to read magazines today? And 91% of people, they chose for the print. They chose for the most expensive of the options. The other options were a lot cheaper, because I think there's a value in print. Well, depending on what you offer. We offer long-form essays, which are a lot more comfortable to read in print. We do have digital editions, and again, publishers should not choose one or the other. You need to consider all the possibilities which are out there, and at the end, we care about stories, and stories is something that needs to be get across. And if someone prefers to read it on the phone, there's no problem with this. In fact, digital media offer a lot more. They can offer an easy way to localize, translate, update things, or even geolocate. For this, again, I talk about the foundation of printing. When I spoke to publishers, how they operate, they often describe quite archaic tools. One of the first things we had to do is like a rethink and create a platform for collaboration between authors. And we built our own online editorial system, which controls, what is behind paywall, what not. It controls, the exchange between translators, researchers, writers. It's kind of versioning system like programmers use, except it's used for publishing. I had hoped to use something ready-made, but unfortunately, there were not tools like this to be ready-made. Publishing hybrid publication, which is in print and digital media, allows also using different things. We geolocate all content. So basically, this is the scope of our magazine. These are all the articles placed on the map. And I think, again, it tells a lot about the publication, about our focus, that it's essentially a design magazine, but it doesn't look only into Italy, Milano, or Helsinki, Finland, but it looks at design in other places, often overlooked examples. So you'll find a couple of examples from Brazil, and a lot in Africa, a lot in India, anywhere you imagine. And this is a live map on our website, and when you click on it, you can actually get to the article. So if you remember that there's one article from Kazakhstan, you just find it and click on it. You don't need to know which number it is, which issue it is, and look for it. It's an easy way to navigate and access content. I'll be talking a lot about behind the scenes, because I always find it more interesting before we start talking about the surface about the magazine itself. One of the things that I found interesting is to explain why things cost as much as they do. Once a year we do this, we allow readers to choose how much to pay for the magazine themselves and to see the consequences of their action. So there's this slider, and if you drag it, you see that if you leave it at €1, you're paying for blank paper and nothing more. which, it's a great deal, but it doesn't pay anyone anything. And then it shows you, like, as you move the slider, what else you cover. And basically, you get to the point where you get to the price that covers what we wanted to produce. Because our magazine is funded without any, funded by readers only, this is, very important for us to have a transparent way to describe how much it costs to produce something, and what, and to involve the readers in the process. Okay, so what is this magazine about? I mentioned unexpected creativity. I mentioned design, but a lot of people get the wrong ideas when talk about design. A lot of people think that design is happening only on surface, and it's only about beautiful objects. And we like to talk about relevance. We talk about impact, what it actually means to people. We measure it by, how much it affects our lives. So if I see only beautiful thing, but it doesn't have any real impact on myself, it's not a story for ourselves. It may be beautiful, but it's not, relevant enough. We also choose not to compete for the recentness, not to be the first one to do things, but because we care about impact, that impact can be measured only over time. So we often pick old stories. We often pick things that have some of a bit of a distance, where you can actually see what happens and how it has been accepted and what changes have been made. So, for example, we wouldn't talk too much about objects like this, however beautiful they are. And we talk like this is as much design as this. Both are designs, except that they both fulfill different functions. But somehow we've seen that this is, something very expensive, this is something very inexpensive, and the idea of design is basically connected with the price tag. It's connected with the education of people. It's connected with, availability, and not really with, the impact, not, how it actually sits. So we see design as something much larger, something that, any human object which we have, anything man-made, has been designed, if we realize it or not. And it's an important thing, so we don't distinguish, what are designer shoes and what are non-designer shoes. They're all shoes, and they all have been designed, and the price has little to do with the function. So some of the stories that we present is often challenging what we perceive as design. We often look at systems. We often look at something which happens underneath, the visible surface. For example, this is a story from the Netherlands, where, if you look at this picture, you don't, what this picture is supposed to tell you is what you don't see. What you don't see on this is that you don't see any traffic lights on this traffic situation. So it's about different way of solving traffic situations, traffic engineering, by not adding separations, not adding more instructions, but removing them, about invisibility. There's a new trend, well, fairly, in the last 20 years, where psychologists and engineers notice that adding more traffic signs does not improve traffic safety. Until now, we believe that, we need to instruct people what to do. But at one point, the environment becomes so saturated that it no longer, conveys information. So instead, the solution would be remove them completely and see what happens. And what happens is that, you get something that looks really chaotic. At the same time, there's no separation, no boundaries, no curbs. At the same time, the number of casualties drops dramatically because people start paying attention. By being put into a situation where they have to pay attention, they naturally slow down, not because of the traffic sign, but because they feel kind of a little bit uncertain about it. It's about absence of things. So here, the main design solution is the absence of design, absence of traffic sign. And we make a point that this is also a valid design approach. Another way of talking about design is that we look at, or how we report on stories, is that we look at things which are known, but we show them in a way that the readership may not have considered it. So most of you probably know the story of Sarajevo. About 20 years ago, there was a tragic conflict, and Sarajevo happened to be in the middle of the siege, which left the city without supply of water, electricity, gas, and nothing at all. We know the story from the media, and the media always looks at a kind of bigger picture. They rarely show the individual. They showed kind of this picture, and talks about the war situation. We're interested to go on the ground and see what actually means to people. And we would find out that people had to adapt to the new situation and conceive these kind of improvised design. Again, it's not something that is beautiful. It's not something that is celebrated for its aesthetics, but it's something that has a very human stories behind them. And when you retell them, you find out a lot more about the situation than you thought. Each of them is solving one particular problem. The problem of, for example, how to bring water to the houses, how to heat their houses, how to make their life more bearable in a very difficult situations. We noticed that the surplus of time, a lack of resources, is the ultimate recipe for creativity. Like a lot of people suddenly, like when they happen to be in a situation, they find this untapped potential to do things. And we would spend time in Sarajevo, report on it, and come up with an article. We often find stories that, again, they are fairly old. This is a story which is also over 100 years old, but rarely considered. Every 4 years, there's a festival in India called Camela, and it attracts a lot of people. And it's basically the biggest gathering of mankind on Earth. It's so big that it's bigger than New York, London, and Paris combined. How do you accommodate so many people? It's usually held on a dried riverbank. So this is a picture before, and this would be a picture after. And this would be a temporary city built just for 8 weeks. In a period of 8 weeks, there would be 30 million people living there, and about 100 million people coming and going. And it would be a functioning city, which would be made in a few weeks without any urban planners, without any chief engineers and architects. I do think it's an unbelievable example of spontaneous grassroots organization and creativity. And we would be interested not to see what lessons we can learn from this. How we can build bridges and hospitals and accommodate these crowds. I think there's a lot to learn from it, especially in situations where we complain about hosting thousands of people. Suddenly, you find examples where it is possible to do. So again, these kind of situations would provide setup for long stories. And we would usually travel, find someone on location to report on it, and find a way how to bring it to the magazine. We would spend usually about 6 months researching and bringing it to a state where we can publish it. And that's why it explains also why we don't talk about time-sensitive subjects, because we need a lot of time to process it and to be able to tell the stories. These are longer stories which need to be told. In the last issue, we traveled to Bhutan. And again, Bhutan is not a place which is renowned for its design. People celebrate it for its unorthodox views about economic development. But we find out that in these small places, there are examples of creativity which are often overlooked. Bhutan had to design their national identity because it's surrounded by 2 huge countries, China and India, which like to annex other countries. China annexed Tibet and India annexed Sikkim. So for them, it's very important to define themselves, and design plays a very important role in their identity. One story that we reported on was the story of the Bhutanese post stamps. At the time, in 1960s, Bhutan started publishing post stamps. At that time, they did not have any post office. So they had first the post stamps before they had a postal service. And you may wonder, why, what's going on? The idea was that, the post stamps became quite an unorthodox way of fundraising for the country. In order to establish the post office and to build a road network, they needed revenue. And they were hoping to do the fundraising by selling post stamps internationally to collectors outside of Bhutan. So basically, these little post stamps, they work like they are just receipts for any value that you print on it. And if you purchase that receipt but not fulfill their function, it's a pure profit. Quite an ingenious idea, but also the post stamps had to be innovative enough to appeal to collectors worldwide. So these stamps were the first ones. They're not very successful, But what became successful were the later ones. Bhutan produced in the 60s, and this is from the 68, the first 3D stamps, something unheard of, presenting space programs. At the time when Bhutan had no TV stations and no broadcasting, they were showing these kind of scientific images from the space. First, lenticular pictures. They produced first stamps printed on silk, first stamps printed on metal sheets, first stamps on extruded plastic. A really innovative series of stamps. How about this one? This is a stamp which is a small LP. It's a small LP that presents a story of Bhutan narrated by the king himself, presented in the country. So if you received it, you could put it on a turntable and play it, both in Dzongkha, the national language, and in English. Until now, these are really big collector's items, and now they sell for hundreds of euros. I do have them, so I can tell you exactly the prices. But this program, they managed to bring so much funds to the country and allow building schools, allow building roads. So suddenly you see a completely different role of design. They not only look pretty, but they are beautiful because of their function, what they actually mean to the people. We met people who went to schools only because of this kind of program which was started. And I do think that this is an example of ingenuity on the ground. I started talking a lot about logistics, which I do think it's important because I spoke about advertising as one way to fund the magazines. And if you decide to reduce the advertising, it has a significant impact on the distribution of the magazine. The magazines which are funded by advertising, they can be presented on your airport newsstand. If you don't do that, you probably have to find a different channel. And again, I have a previous experience. I ran a different magazine called ... This started in 2000. And the hard lessons were that we self-produced it, funded, printed, and then we would give it to a distributor to sell in the US. And we would receive 18%, 1/8 of the cover price back. So 82% of the cover price was consumed by the distribution itself. There are so many parties involved, and each taking a small bit. There will be nothing coming back to us. And again, this works for magazines which are funded by ads, because the money from the sales is insignificant. But if you don't rely on ads, you have to come up with a different ways how to present it, and how to distribute the magazine. So when we started Works at Work, I clearly knew that I don't want to go this way, but there are not many alternatives. This is a proposal we have made. Do we have sound for this?
Works That Work wants to examine often ignored areas of design. In the spirit of this aim, we also intend to bypass traditional distribution networks, which typically take the largest part of the cover price, as well as control where the publication will be sold and at what price. Instead, we would like to deepen our relationships with our readers and make them partners in this enterprise. We call this social distribution. Let's see how it works. A reader based, for example, in Buenos Aires knows a lovely bookstore in his town that could be a good place to sell the magazine. He first contacts the bookstore, and if they're interested, he then contacts us. The next time he or one of his friends travels to one of our magazine hubs, he buys copies of the magazine at a 50% discount. He in turn sells the magazines to the bookstore at 60 to 75% of the cover price, so the reader's profit is 10 to 25% of the cover price. He sends information about the store to us, and we publish it on our website, driving other potential readers to the store. This distribution process supports local bookstores, involves readers as partners and agents of the magazine, ensures that all the parties get paid, and frees us up to focus on what we do best: publishing the magazine.
The readers are, very important, and the readers allowed us to do what we do. They fund the magazine fully because most of the revenue of the magazines comes from subscriptions. we decided to reach out and ask the readers to do even more and to help distribute the magazine for us. It worked in a way how the video describes, but only in a limited way. We had trouble reaching out to stores, often which they have a contract with existing distributor, and we did not want to disturb that relationship. Instead, we found out that directly reader distribution to their social network is a lot more effective. We designed these bags where you can put exactly 10 copies in a bag, and it weighs 1 kilo, so it's very portable. And these magazines are brought, they can be brought to different places. This has worked really well in places which are ignored by traditional distribution. We brought these magazines to South America, to Middle East, into many countries in Africa, in Asia. I'm really proud that we managed to bring it even to Iran, which is under embargo, and you cannot buy Western publications. As long as the readers wanted to bring it to places, we found a way how to do it. In this informal way of distributing, we would give the readers the discount that normally the distributor gets if they get the bag of magazines. And in this way, we distribute about 30% of our magazine, which nicely, gradually, organically extends the readership. To support this, we also have this section on the website where when people travel somewhere, like I came yesterday from Amsterdam, and I have a free space in my suitcase, I can report that I have 2 or 3 kilos extra, and I can take things along with me. Because shipping cost is a huge part of, which can increase the price of a publication. The readers themselves, they make the magazine more accessible and more affordable to places where otherwise it would be impossible to get. I'm pleased to be here because currently we are on issue 8. We do it twice a year, so we started 4 years ago. This is our 5th year. And we announced last month that issue 10 will be our last one. We received a lot of, after I put this blog post up, we received a lot of reactions. Some were, thanking us for what we have done. Some people were angry that, we're quitting at a time when we started and did the hard work. Some people were just sad. I don't find it necessarily sad. I think one should not get into something if it is not aware that things start and also end. I think that we started it to prove that it's possible to create a publication which relies on readers, not the advertising. We wanted to make a model which pays all the contributors fair amount of money. We wanted to show how to do strong journalism, and I think we managed to do most of it. And I cannot really imagine what else we could do. So that's why, like issue 10, will be a conclusive one. At the same time, it's not the end of the project because by ending something, it allows to do something else. When we produced the Bhutan issue, which is the latest one, we also produced a documentary film. And the film is something that I'm very much interested in because it becomes another way to tell stories and make them possibly even more widely accessible. So we produced a first documentary film, which is about 40 minutes long film about designing identity of Bhutan. And I'll show you the trailer of it.
This is the story of the survival of a tiny country amongst giants. Hidden among the Himalayas for centuries, the Kingdom of Bhutan saw its neighbors being absorbed by larger countries. Realizing that it had to reinforce its position as a distinctive sovereign state, Bhutan acted to display its cultural identity in its architecture, dress code, and language. Although Bhutan has one of the world's fastest-growing economies, it balances economic development with cultural and environmental protection. It has engaged in projects that recognize that financial prosperity is only one factor in general quality of life. And there was a time when its highly innovative postage stamps were its largest source of revenue, as well as an effective means of presenting itself to the international community. Today, hydropower, its sole source of electrical power and electricity, is its largest export. While most countries cut their trees and consume their natural resources, Bhutan has established itself as a role model in issues of climate change, environmental conservation, and sustainable development. As Bhutan emerges from its ancient isolation to seek its place in the modern global community, many are now carefully watching the examples that it provides. What does this tiny kingdom have to offer to the world?
Well, let me put it this way. All of us can learn from each other. All of us.
All right. And by, concluding the print edition, I think it allows us to do a lot more. So I can imagine that after this one, we can probably produce other documentary films. Well, we'll see how it goes. But that's another chapter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. I'm still deeply impressed about this project, and this film was wonderful. Thank you very much for bringing this.
It's a longer film.
Yes, but a short one.
We'll probably have a premiere next week already. Okay.
Yes,
in The Hague.
In The Hague. Okay. What you have done is exactly this. What we want to have in this conference, to bring a deep insight, to look behind the scene, and not only to show wonderful pages. But there's one thing, what I was impressed at the early beginning of the project, this magazine that looks here so big. Yeah? It's original, it's only this size. Yeah? What was the reason why it is only this size?
Well, it's a good question, because my background is design, but I decided not to design the magazine itself. And when I gave the brief to our designers, we told them that it had to be very portable and very easy to travel with. We gave them a limit that, including the envelope, it could not be more than 200 grams. So if you put all these things together, long-form reading, more bookish feel, the fact that it cannot be more than 200 grams, so it can be easy to ship and easy to travel with, you come up with this. And this is also the most economic format to print in the Netherlands. 16 by 24 is the format where you don't have any paper waste. So we try to make sure that also production is as sustainable as it can be. We produce it locally, just 5 minutes bike ride from my office. Bike ride. Also, like a small thing, that I can brag about is that we use also binding of the magazine, which is called Otabind. So you can read it with one hand, which is not very common, that you can read a small format magazine on a bus or anywhere, and still, it doesn't close. So you need to consider all these details to make it work.
This brings me to the second question, and because this answer is a classical way, like you're thinking. And originally you are a designer, but for me, you're more a design strategist or a design conceptioner, and you're doing so much different things. You are a type designer, you have type distribution, you have to work this works. You're still working with the ballot, for example. Could be another wonderful lecture sometimes. And what was your way from original be a designer to become somebody who is organizing design, thinking about design, not design thinking, but thinking about design?
Right. Well, I like to see things from a longer perspective. And when I looked at my colleagues and models in the traditional design world, I noticed that they start running offices, which they grew bigger and bigger, and their founders become disconnected from what they were really good in at the beginning. They had more people who were doing their job, and they became disconnected from the work. I remember the most exciting time in my short design career was when I was a student, when you learn things for the first time and you don't know how to do things. And I like to bring this feeling to my daily practice every day. I like to do things for the first time when I have no idea how to do it, but figure out what to do. And that's why when the magazine was ideal way, because it forces me to deal with stories and with areas that I don't know too much about, and it's very exciting to keep learning. So to build its learning process in your life, because normally you're becoming expert. I mean, by becoming expert, you know more and more about less and less. I'd like to know more about other things than just about one particular thing. And so we conceive these projects which allow us to do it.
And probably this is one of the reasons to stop a project like this.
Well,
after 10 years.
Again, some things start and end, and people always put a lot of energy into starting things, and they don't think about possibly ending it. And I think it's a lot healthier to end on a high rather than being forced to end when you run out of energy or sources, or I don't know, or you cannot pay the bills. We do it better than ever. We have the most subscribers. We have the last issue is sold the most copies. So they shouldn't. That's not the issue. But we did what the plan was, and I'd like to do something else now.
I think we can learn a lot about this. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you.